Good evening and welcome to the second episode of our Youth on the Move podcast, where we gather once a month to discuss issues that is happening in our world today and bringing the truth to today's youth. My name is Jayla O, and I am a senior mass media arts major at the illustrious Clark Atlanta University, and I will be the hostess for Youth on the Move podcast. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of voting in the upcoming election. And joining us, we will have the U.S. Senate candidate Representative Valencia Stovall, who is here to answer our questions and yours. How are you doing today?
I am fine. Thank you, Jayla, and to the Youth on the Move podcast for inviting me to come on.
Yes. So first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your campaign and background?
Yes, I was born and raised in Southeast Atlanta. Moved to Clayton County in 2006, where I currently reside. I've been a state representative since 2012. Did not have aspirations to be an elected official, but it just ended up happening. This particular seat became vacant by the current legislator. She ran for another office, and so when it became vacant, my family and other people approached me about running for this particular seat as a state representative. So I've been a state representative for 8 years. Been very successful, been able to work across the aisles with passing meaningful legislation that's been important for Georgians overall. And I'm a Democrat right now as a state legislator, but I'm running as an independent for the U.S. Senate seat.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and hop into this voting situation because we got a lot to cover today. A lot has happened since the last time we did a podcast. So lately, we've been trying to get everybody to get registered to vote and to make sure that they are voting. So what do you think are some misconceptions that some people might have about voting?
A lot of times I run into many people who say that voting is not important, that their vote does not count. What's the use of voting? And the same people are going to get elected into office. So those are some of the things that I've heard over the years, and even more so now that we're in this presidential election, and then other down ballot elections that are on the ballot as well. And it's very important to each time to vote each time. It does not matter if it's a special election or it's a primary election or the general election that's coming up in November the 3rd.
Do you think that the last presidential election or even the last Georgia election for the governor, do you think that has any influence as to why some people are so hesitant to vote in this upcoming election?
Yes, I think it did a lot. A lot of people were rooting for their particular candidate, and when that candidate did not win, just like even on the local level, people get upset and just get disinterested in voting because they believe that the voter might have been suppressed or they were taken off the voter roll and they didn't know that process. So, as a state legislator, one of the experience that I'm bringing is that understanding policy, and we just actually passed a voter bill last session. And it kind of cleared up a lot of the holes that were in that legislation. And when it comes to voting, allowing people to be able to have the option to vote, when they can be removed or purged from the voter roll. When it comes down to precincts, that was another thing. Some people going to the precincts, they had been moved and they didn't know, they didn't get a notification. That was in the legislation as well. But I think overall, if you are concerned about your community, and you want a better community, the only way that happens is you being participating in the voting process, because it's all about policy. Everything we've seen, even with the pandemic, all of it has resulted back to policies.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the pandemic, how can this election affect the future treatment of the COVID?
Okay, you finished. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. It definitely is going to affect you, like I just mentioned about policy. So when you're voting for individuals who will be in positions to make decisions, whether that's city mayor, city council, whether they're county commissioners, whether it's your school board, the judges, your public service commissioners, state representatives, senators, and even on the federal level with your House of Rep, senators, and then you go up to the vice president and the president positions. So all of those individuals play a key role in what's going to happen and how your local government is going to handle a pandemic, just like we had seen now. Of course, it was unprecedented. We never have gone through a pandemic. I know not in my lifetime and many other people's lifetime. So there were some things to expect that was not probably not going to be done properly. But those things that could have been done properly, if we had the better policies in place, we could have gone through this pandemic a lot better. So many people would not have been suffering as much. But that comes from the policymakers, which are the people that you and I and everyone who votes and everyone who do not vote. You're still going to have those policymakers that are in place. So you want to make sure that you are researching the candidates to make sure that they come up to a line up to what it is that you want to see in your community. They're not going to line up 100%. None of us ever agree 100%. But you try to look at what's the majority of what that person's point of view is and how they likely will vote for you for things that directly affect you in your everyday life.
Okay. And referencing back to the last presidential election, of course, well, it was an upset to a lot of people. And one thing that I noticed was that I'm aware of was that the popular vote versus the electoral college. Because from what I'm aware, Hillary did win the popular vote, but Trump won the electoral college. And so the electoral college, that confuses a lot of people. So can you explain the difference between the popular vote and what the electoral college is?
Yes. So when our founding fathers founded the United States, their whole goal, and you can tell it with, you look at the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all of those that have been formulated, it was to allow for a fair democratic process, a fair democracy, which allows everyone to be able to have a representation and them to be able to decide who they want to represent them on whichever level of government that they're going to be voting on. And so you have the popular vote, which everybody which is used when it comes down to the Senate race, all the Senate race, all the U.S. House of Representatives, all the way down the ballot, because your mayor, city council, county commission, the popular vote is used with the 50% plus one of the person that gets that amount of votes. Then they automatically are elected in to that office that they're seeking. When it comes to presidential and vice president, that selection process is different, which is what you talked about, the electoral college. And it's not a college like when you go to, when you attend Clark Atlanta University. It's not a college like that. Some people, get confused with that. It's just a word terminology that they use. And it's a selection of a group of people from that particular state. And it's according to population, but not according to population. It's kind of tricky. And those are the individuals that cast their votes on that day. They have usually after the election, before the election, they cast their votes and then they tally up. And so each state has a certain number of electoral college people that actually are going to determine who the president is. Now, some states have it where if the popular vote is a certain amount, the electoral college follows that vote. In other states, it's not set up like that. And so we have some inconsistencies when it comes to that. So that's why you heard a lot of people lately saying we need to do away with the electoral college. I would say the good thing, the pro with the electoral college is that those smaller states like Ohio, Delaware, that are not as large as California, they still get an opportunity to be able to have some kind of say-so in who they want to elect as the president. Even though their electoral college numbers are not the same as California, because of course California is a very populated state, but it does, in a sense, keep them in the running of being able to have a voice for who's elected. Other people say, well, the con against the electoral college is that why not use the popular vote just like we use it for everything else? The only difference is that the president and the vice president are countrywide votes. Your U.S. Senate and your state U.S. House of Representatives are located in your particular state. So that's the difference when you start talking about the population vote versus the electoral college and being fair to allow everyone to be able to have a voice in who they want to be elected. So it's a little tricky, but you're hearing a lot, talk, especially since that last presidential election, when everybody was excited and thought that one candidate then found out the other candidate won, and everybody was, how's that? I'm not going to go vote anymore. But that's not the right attitude to take. You just make sure that you're putting in people. When I talk about policy again, it's those that want to be able to work towards a fairness in the election because it's very important. And I've known a case where a person lost a race from one vote. Somebody did not come out and vote, or sometimes you had 10 people that they just lost the race. They were good candidates. So that's why you should still vote every time, because that's your only option of being able to determine who's going to represent you and your values in that elected position.
Right. That's the way to use your voice, y'all. Votes. Okay. Yes. Okay, so why is it important that we not only just focus on voting Trump out of office, but just his whole cabinet?
Well, his cabinet is assigned by him, and he selects the cabinet. And the Senate actually confirms those administrative appointments that are done, like the Supreme Court Justice appointment that's coming up. The Senate is the one that's going to confirm whoever that person is. And so when you look at voting, you're looking at what's the majority, who's going to have the majority. That's always important, no matter if it's on the federal level, the state level, even on the local level, even with your mayor and city council. When they get ready to vote on the city council, they're always looking at who has the majority vote, who can persuade the majority of the people in that elected position to vote towards them. So it's the same way on the federal level. And so, and it's by party. And that's one of the reasons I decided to run as an independent, because sometimes you get caught up with what the party says and how they say you're supposed to vote. And that might not necessarily be the best for the individual and the people that you're representing, because you don't never know what's behind the party leadership as to why they're telling you to vote a certain way. And then when you don't vote a certain way, you're ostracized or saying that you're not a team player. And so I thought it was important, running for this particular office in Washington, D.C., to not be beholden to one particular party, but being an independent, so I could independently think, I can independently vote, and at the same time respect both parties for the values that each one of them have.
I like that. I like that. Okay. And so what is at stake if we don't vote? Like, what are some things that you think that could go down if a lot of us just don't go out and do what we're supposed to do, which is vote?
Definitely. One of the things I've said, I've held some Facebook Live events that I've done. I do every Friday at 6:00 on my Facebook page at Valencia Stovall. And early on, one of the things we talked about was that if you like what has happened to you in the pandemic, don't vote. If you like that, having to be at home, sheltered in place, that was okay with you. You like having to be laid off of your job, waiting on your unemployment, that check hasn't come. You like being on the verge of being evicted out of your home, or you like having to leave college early. All of a sudden, they called you and told you all who was staying on campus, pack your stuff. You got to leave right away. So if all of those things were okay with you, and you're looking at the economy, and you're looking at what the job market is going to look like, you're looking at how healthcare has been handled in this country, not only the country, but in the state. So you like being a college student, and if your parents don't have health care, they can add you to their health care plan. So you like not having health care because you're a college student, then don't vote. Just keep on, don't vote. Don't vote. But if all those things that I mentioned, plus some that, very, huge number of things I did not mention, and if that bothers you, even if one of those things bother you, that's why you should vote. because the only way you can change that is having the right people in place. And it might not come right away, but you have to keep on voting and keep on convincing your family and friends to get involved. And then not only that, not only just voting, but you need to be involved in the process. You need to attend meetings. You need to voice your opinion about things that you see that are not right. And it even starts when you, as a college student, you all have student government and you have the different student union, student organization. Why do you all get together? You get together because y'all have like minds and you want to see certain things done. And so you look at the same process when you're talking about being a voter. It's the same thing. You are electing people that are going to look out for your best interests. And when they're looking out for your best interests, then they would have known ahead of time that, okay, this pandemic is coming. This is how it's going to affect our lower income areas. This is how it's going to affect our rural areas. We need to make sure money's in place. We need to make sure that policies are able to be changed and not so stringent so that it can accommodate the flexibility that's going to have to happen. When you look at our school system, if you if you have a younger brother or sister and they weren't able to graduate, march down the aisle and graduate like everybody else were, don't vote. Or you got a younger brother and sister that's doing distance learning and your parents are stressed out trying to figure out who's going to watch them because they may have to go to work or all of it. Don't vote, because if you like the way it is, don't vote. But if at any part of that you don't like, that should be enough motivation to go and vote.
Y'all heard her, y'all. If y'all like the mess that we in, then don't vote. But otherwise, y'all need to vote. Okay. So, in your opinion, what are some of the most important policies that Biden is trying to implement if he were to get in office, which hopefully?
Well, I think that overall, and I won't just hammer on Biden, and I won't hammer on Trump. I think that overall, when we're talking about voting, you are supposed to and you should always research the candidates and see which one of them line up to which the most that you want to see done. If things are important, like you're a college student, so to me, my thoughts will be that you're looking at, okay, once I'm a senior, I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm gonna have all this student loan debt. I don't want to pay all the student loan debt. That is going to affect my credit. So even if I get a high paying job, I want to be a homeowner. I'm still going to have that student debt on my credit. And so when you look at that, what your future is or things that you want to see happen, then that's when you line up those candidates. And it might be Joe Biden that says, hey, I want that everyone that goes to college, not have to pay anything. Because when you look at the benefit of you finishing college and putting into place, what you've learned in college, then you add it back to the economy. When you talk about healthcare, everyone should have healthcare. It should not be dependent, in my opinion, on whether you have a job or not. It should be the duty and responsibility of our country to be able to do it. Not saying it's socialism, but it's only right, because when you look at what's affected by healthcare, if you're not healthy, you can't go to school as a college student. Your professor can't come to work as a professor if that professor is sick. Your parents can't go to work if they're sick. So that means that companies' production of services are going to slow down or decrease, or they're going to go out of business, like so many of them now have gone out of business because of COVID-19. And then when you look at your younger brothers or sisters or your neighbor, they can't go to school if they're sick. The teachers can't go in and teach if they're sick. So everything is dependent on health care. The affordable and accessible health care when it comes down to how our economy is going to thrive. So I just say I'm not, promoting either candidate, but making sure you as a voter are looking on their websites and finding those things that resonate with you.
Okay. And considering that random people are getting purged from the system every day, how often should we check our registration status before we go in to vote?
Definitely you want to check it at least 2 months ahead of time. If not, before then. And right now it's the ideal time to check it. We have not started early voting. Early voting action will start October the 12th and run all the way to October the 30th. So the time to check it is now, because The last day to register is October the 5th, which is in about 2 weeks. And if you
Mhm.
have not registered by that date, you cannot and will not be allowed to vote, or your vote won't count for the November the 3rd election. So it's important to go to the Secretary of State's website, mvp.sos.ga.gov, and put in your first initial, last name, your birthday, in the county where you were last registered at. And then if it comes up and shows your polling location, it's going to give you some other information, then you know you're in the system. Now, if you put it in and you don't pop up in the system, that might be that you might have a different last name. Say if you were married and you forgot to change your maiden name to your married name, you've been going by your married name, so you have to go back in and kind of play around with that entry. Or say your county, you forgot that you're thinking that you were registered in Fulton, but you really were registered in Cobb. So you might have to change that county. And if you're not sure, then you could always call the local county registrar's office to see see if they have you on the voter list. And then if not, then you go ahead and you can register online by having the driver's license ID number or your state ID by putting that information in. So it's really relatively easy for those who want to vote. I don't think nobody should be forced into and harassed into voting, because what happens is if you're not freely voting, you're going to just vote for anybody. And just think, like talking about that one vote that somebody lost, just think of somebody just say, I'm just going to go and vote for that person. I don't care who it is. Yeah, you don't elected the wrong person for 4 years or for 2 years that you're going to have to live with. So that's why it's important that people should freely want to go and vote, not putting any pressure, on them, but showing them the importance, like you all are having this podcast. Why is it important? What does it mean to me as a young person? What does it mean to me as a middle-aged person? Or what does it mean to me as a senior to vote? And then when you look at it, what does it mean to my family? That's going to be here for 4 years, 2 years when this person is elected? How is that going to affect our livelihood? Will we have safe communities? Will we have a nice place that we can go to a nice park and don't have to worry about the lights are knocked out on the streets or anything like this? So those things that are important to you, that's the only thing I could keep emphasizing. Each individual has to know what things are important to you and what you would like to see in your community, in your country, in your state. And then you find those individuals who are running for office that are lined up to them and reach out to them and start asking them questions. How do you feel about this? What's your position on this? And that helps you to be able to identify the best candidate.
Okay. And as for the absentee ballot, do you feel like, or is it really safe to do the absentee ballot this year? Because I know a lot of people have been having a lot of concerns with whether or not their ballot is going to get to the polls in time, or is it even going to get there in general? So do you think that it's really safe to do the absentee ballot?
I think it is safe to do the absentee ballot. It gives you another option, especially for those who are very concerned about the pandemic and don't want to take the chance of going into the polling precinct or don't want to stand in long lines. Nobody should be standing in long lines. You have the option of almost 30 days, a little bit less than 30 days today to go and vote early. And then the polls are going to be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So there's no excuse. You can go on your lunch break. And even some companies are now allowing their employees to be off on election day. But so, you can take advantage of that. I would stress go before election day because anything can happen. And you don't want your vote not to count. You don't want to have to be given a provisional ballot, which means that when you went to vote, they didn't have your correct information in the system. Or you may have gotten an absentee ballot that it shows in the system, but you didn't receive it. And so it has recorded that you already voted. Well, you can cancel out that absentee ballot and tell them you want to vote in person. So there are a lot of things that you need to know. But yes, absentee ballots are safe. What I wouldn't recommend necessarily mailing them. There are a lot of drop boxes. So each one of the counties that you live in have drop boxes. And what those are, they look just like mailboxes. And they're located at different locations across the county to make it easier for you. And guess what? You can just get in your car, ride with somebody else, or have somebody drop your absentee ballot off. It's a rule with that. You can't be dropping off more than 10 ballots. One person can't. But you have people that are handicapped. You have senior citizens that can't get to those drop boxes, but they can get the comfort of their home. And the other thing I like about the absentee ballot, you get a chance to take your time and look through each one of those candidates. And guess what? You can Google them while you're looking at the ballot while you're at home. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. So you can Google and find out who those candidates are instead of waiting on election day and you trying to figure out, like in the race I'm in, there are 20 people in that race. But of course, you don't have to look up anybody else. Just look for Stovall. That's all. I'm number 16 on the ballot.
Okay.
And that's the only race that'll have more than one person, more than two people that'll be on the ballot. Everybody else will only have two people in each one of those races. Some might just have one. So yes, absentee ballots are safe. Fill them out, take them to the drop box, and you're done. Then you might not get a sticker. Some people like having that I voted sticker, but it's okay. You might can go in and ask, can I get a sticker? I voted early. I still want my sticker. But yes, so I definitely encourage whatever option it is for you to use, do not let your vote be wasted by not actually voting.
Yes. And also for our viewers and listeners, I do want to point out some common mistakes that can disqualify your November mail ballot, and those are improperly filling out your ballot. So make sure you guys are filling it out on a flat, dry surface. Of course, use common colored ink, blue, black. That's pretty much it. Make sure you read everything carefully. Sometimes people forget to sign your envelope, so make sure you sign the envelope because it is a little spot for you to sign. Another mistake is using a different signature from what your state has on file. This is not the time to change up your signature or get a little fancy. This is not the time to do that. And also not including required additional documentation, because some states require a signature from a witness, and there are like 13 states that require some voters to submit a photocopy of their photo ID with the absentee ballots. And then also another common mistake is, of course, sending your ballot in a little too late. So let's not make those mistakes this November. Okay.
In the state of Georgia, we don't require you to send in a photocopy of your ID when you're sending in your absentee ballot. The only thing you need to make sure you're doing, like she said, is be legible on there. When making sure you fill in the circle completely, and don't have any stray marks, because if you end up filling out two, say in one race, you end up circling two in one race, then they're going to cancel out your vote because they don't know which one it is. So just taking your time with those absentee ballots. And then if you don't feel comfortable doing the absentee, you could go into the polling precinct, go early. They have a lot of protective equipment with the mask. They even have the stylus pen for you to be able to use. And so there's a lot of contact lists when you're going in to vote. And that way you can actually see, and then on that big screen, when you're voting in person, you can even look and see if you made any mistakes. You can go back and correct it before you actually print out your ballot. And then when you go in person, you will need to print your ballot out, and you have to put it in the scanner. The poll worker cannot do that. And that's the only way you're making sure that your vote is counted. Once you put it through the scanner, then they will end up giving you the sticker on your way out. Do not take that paper with you when you leave out the voting precinct, because if not, you're going to have to start all back over. That means that vote has been voted.
Listen to her, y'all. Okay. Next question. Can out-of-state college students register in the state that they attend college in?
Yes, they can. So you could either decide, because of the time that you usually are staying within a certain state or the other state, depending on where you're going, you can change your voter registration to vote in that particular state because of the time that you're living in the other state. You cannot, it's against the law to vote in two different locations. That is against the law. So you have to decide whether you want to let your vote count where you attend college at, that you might be the most active at in that particular college town. Or you know that back home, you're going to be going back home, and you say, well, I'm going to have that. And then that's where the absentee ballot plays a good role in as well. If you're going to be leaving your home state, if you're in college, but you're still registered at your home state, you can request the absentee ballot be sent to you at your college dorm or at your college address, because it's a place on there where you fill out the absentee application that they'll ask you where do you want to mail it to, and you can put the address in, and they'll mail it to you, and you can mail it back, back in. But if you don't trust the mailing process, and make sure you do it early, make sure you do it very early if you're going to mail it, because there have been some issues with the post office, and so that's why a lot of people are kind of scary about whether they wanted to mail it. And you have to put a stamp on it if you're going to mail it in. But if you're doing a drop box, no stamps. Only thing you're going to waste is some gas. You go over there and put it in that into that drop box.
Okay. And what are some qualifications for a felon to register to vote in the state of Georgia?
You said, what are the qualifications, or what are the consequences of failing to register to vote? What's the question?
Well, what are the qualifications? Because I know that in some
what
states,
do you need to do to register to vote? Okay, I got you. So you have to be at least 18 to vote, to actually vote. You can register at 17 and a half. So if you're a high school student, you can go ahead and register when you turn 17 and a half. You cannot actually vote until you're actually 18. So if say your birthday is on November the 5th, and the election is November 3rd, you can't vote in November 3rd because your birthday has not come. Now, if your birthday is November 3rd or any time before that, you can go ahead and vote in the state of Georgia. But you can register at 17 and a half.
Okay. And what about the felons? Because I know in some states, different states have different requirements or qualifications when it comes to felons. So what about in the state of Georgia? In the state of Georgia, what qualifications or requirements need to be met in order for a felon to get registered to vote or to vote?
Okay. So convicted felons are eligible to vote in Georgia if their sentence has been completed. So if you were convicted of a felony and you served all of your time, then you are eligible to vote. What happens sometimes is that the convicted felon does not know that, and they don't know to go and check their status or to re-register, especially if they may have gotten purged when they first registered. And if you hadn't voted for a while, you end up getting taken off the voter roll. So make sure you're checking the status. And then if you have any problems, the Georgia Justice Project, that's www.gjp, G like God, J like Jack, P like Paul.org. Phone number is 404-827-0027. They help many people that have been convicted and are eligible to vote, because you might have to have an expungement paper that you're sending in to the voter registration office to make it sure, proving that you have met your requirements. This was your sentence that you've done. It should not be like that, but sometimes information is not uploaded correctly into the database system, and it might still show them as not having completed or served their time as a convicted felon.
Mm-hmm. And for the people who are planning on physically going to the polls, do you recommend that people look at a sample ballot before they get to the polls?
Yeah, so one good thing about that, my voter page website I told you about, which was mvp.sos.ga.gov. Once you put in your information, and then on the left-hand side, it'll say sample ballot. So you can click on sample ballot, and it'll give you the ballot for you. Remember, each county will have a different sample ballot, and then depending on where you live at in that county, your sample ballot might be different from someone else that lives across town, because you have your local races like your state representative, your state senators, and even your congressional seats, some of your congressional seats. So those things, on the school board is another local race that'll be on the ballot as well, and your judges. So some of those things might be different depending on where you live in that county. So it's best to go and look up your name on that My Voter page, click on sample ballot, and if you can print it out, that's good. If not, you can just keep it on your phone, screenshot it on your phone, and then that way, when you get your ballot or you're going in to vote, you can just use your phone to say, oh, okay, this is what I think I'm going to vote for. And make your own notes. You can make your notes as you go in to vote. Only thing you can't do when you go into the polling precinct is take a picture of that ballot. That's against the law. You cannot do that. And you can't be taking pictures while you're in the voting precinct. But you can have your phone and you make notes of who you're going to vote for. That makes the process faster and less stress for you because you know who you're going in to vote and you going in and coming right on back out.
Mm-hmm. So speaking, well, what other positions will be on the ballot? I guess on the Georgia ballot at least,
Mm-hmm.
besides the presidential, of course.
So you have the president, vice president. You have the U.S. Senate, which is a race. I mean, there are 2 U.S. senators that represent each state. There are a total of 100 senators. And so you have the two. So you'll see the first U.S. Senate race, and then you'll see the second, which is a special election, because the race I'm running in, Senator Isaacson retired from this seat. And so when he retired, the governor made an appointment, but the people have to decide who they want to represent them for the remaining 2 years on that particular term. Senators are elected every 6 years. And so there were 2 years left. And so even with that, in that particular race, it's very historical for me because once I'm elected, I'll be the first African-American woman to ever be elected as a senator from the state of Georgia. And I'll be the third ever to serve in the U.S. Senate for the United States of America. We've only had 2 Black women to serve. Kamala is the second one, but when she goes to Vice P, we won't have Vice President. We won't have anyone there looking at our interests and making sure we have a seat at the table. So I did want to mention that. So beyond the 2 Senate seats, you have the U.S. House of Representatives. So you'll be making one choice for that. Everybody, we have 14 congressional seats, and those are on the House side, U.S. House side. So you'll be choosing who you're going to vote for that. Then you get down to your Public Service Commission. It's going to be another one that's going to be on the ballot, on some people's ballot across the state. Then you have all your state elected officials. So you have 1 state representative you're voting for, 1 state senator that you're voting for, category. And then you have your school board members. You have your judges that are on there, and you might have some other minor positions like a soil conservative person. Somebody don't know, never know who they are on that particular ballot. So that kind of and you also have your county commissioners on the ballot. You may have your mayor and city council, depending on if this is an election year for your local government. It might not be. Most of the times, mayor and city council usually during the odd years, but some local governments have things that are a little bit different. You also may have a ballot. I know you're going to have a ballot question, constitutional ballot question on this ballot. So everybody in the state of Georgia will vote on that constitutional ballot. And then you might have a local ballot question just for your county.
Mm-hmm. And as a candidate, what are some things that you plan to do to fight voter suppression if you were to get the position?
Well, one of it definitely starts with education. I think that and believe that our young people should have civics classes. We do have social studies classes, but they're really not civics. And I think that once we are able to help our young people and youth understand the importance of democracy and what does that mean and why it's important, and they learn at a younger age as to why voting is important, then it becomes a habit. Once they become an adult, you don't have to go, like we're having to do all of this education on voter registration, voting, why it's important. You don't have to do all of that. So I think that we need to do a better job in the state of Georgia of educating the young people at a younger age. That also helps their parents to become involved because they're going to be going home talking about what they have learned in those classes. So that's the first part of the education part. And also making sure that we are fighting against any laws or legislation or bills that are going to suppress or cause people not to have the freedom and the choice of being able to vote. I think ballot access is another very important, which means there should not just be 2 parties on the ballot. You need to let, if anybody want to run, they want to run as independent, a libertarian, a Democrat, Republican. It should not be restrictions on who can run. If they pay their money and they meet the qualifications, they should be able to run. That gives the public and the voters additional choices and not just down to just 2 particular parties, because it might not be who you want to vote for. So those type of things. Having access, I believe, in the state of Georgia, and this is be something working with the state legislators because this is something that they will have to pass. But allowing people to be able to register to vote on the day of election.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it should be open that you should not have to go to a certain precinct to vote. You should be, if you live in that county, no matter if you ride to a precinct, you should be able to go in there to vote. And I'm gonna tell you the significance of that. We do early voting, and when you think about the process of early voting, you don't go to your precinct for early voting. They might tell you these are the locations, but when you get there, if you go in and say you have a family member across town, both of y'all can go. You're gonna get separate ballots because that little card, once they register, figure out who you are, and they give you that particular card, it's specific for you. So I don't see why we can't do that during on the day of the election. This that you go anywhere to vote. It also suppresses people when they're not paying attention a lot of times, and they just go to a precinct or their precinct has moved and they didn't get the notification that it moved, which by law they're supposed to let them know 30 days in advance. But sometimes it does not happen. So those type of things, making sure that we're able to secure people's right, and if they want to vote, allowing them to vote, taking all these barriers off of having to just register to vote. Even when it comes to the convicted felon, should automatically be that they're able to register to vote. It should be automatically sent a card, a voter registration card, where they don't have to go through all of these other things that they're having to go through just to vote.
Mm-hmm. And also, along with that, not only what do you do to what do you plan to do to voter suppression, but also social injustices because social justice never stopped, but right now we being tired, but we really tired. So yes, what do you plan
I
to do
think
about that?
it also still goes back to education, and it
Mm-hmm.
helps you to understand that when it comes down to policy, you're looking at those who are going to be elected into office, and making sure that you have access and awareness. I call it double A. Those are
Mm-hmm.
things I'm pushing for. I'm pushing for economic opportunity, which allows for looking at our education system and reforming our current education system. Is outdated and it's not helping our young kids from 0 to 12th grade, and it's definitely not helping our college students as well. It allow you all to be able to finish college early, and you're not having to stay there 4 years because everything is so much more accelerated now. So making it easier access for that. Small business is another. Have been a small business owner for 30 years. I've been a community resource and having experience in that and connecting people to resources for about 30 years. So looking at our nonprofits, supporting them, supporting our small businesses, making sure that they are able to operate. And like you as a college student, you have ideas, and there's nothing wrong with you being an entrepreneur if you're not already one, being an entrepreneur, but you have to have support where I think that's where the state and the federal government steps in to help support and maintain our small business so that you all can be profitable. You can be able to hire people in the community and making sure that they have livable wages, and you as well as a business owner. Also, you look at that government efficiency. So making sure that there's not a lot of red tape and it's not flowing through, the information is not flowing through. When you talk about inequality, most of the times it comes from people not knowing. And then when they find out, there's a lot of blocks that are set up. You African American, you got to prove that you're a minority. So all of these things as well. And last is global stewardship. We're not on the island by ourselves. We have to have international relations with other countries. And we have to also look at our sustainability with our environment.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, speaking with you today. Can you tell everyone where they can follow you on Instagram or Facebook at before we close out?
Yes. Yes. So I'm Valencia Stovall. You can definitely check out my website, gostovall.com. That's GOSTOVALL.com. I'm on the social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter at Valencia Stovall. And check me out every Friday at 6 p.m. on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube for the shows that we have on different topics. And
Okay.
remember, Stovall, that's all. Number 16 on the ballot.
I like that. Stovall, that's all. Okay, make sure y'all vote for Representative Valencia Stovall. That's all.
That's
Period.
all.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next month on a new episode of Youth on the Move podcast. This is Jayla O, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.